Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Berman, creator and host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. Our mission is to shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe online, at work, and home, at school. We've learned that the only time you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. And today, we're going to be talking about the ubiquity of ransomware. Unfortunately, it's everywhere. And in particular, it's affecting the healthcare sector, which is why we're incredibly fortunate to have one of the leading experts in this subject matter, Shahid Shah, on the show. Hey, Shahid, how you doing?
I am doing well, and it's so nice to be on a fun show like you guys have put together, Gary. You know, what we do every day is so serious, especially on the healthcare side, literally life and death. But it's really nice to be talking cybersecurity with a fun crowd.
Well, to that end, you can see on the bottom, part of our mission, our corporate culture that we've been really, fortunate to create is to be kind of the tip of the spear to pivot the industry from fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And everyone knows there's a lot to be afraid of and uncertain and doubtful. I'm not trying to minimize that, but that's covered by everyone else in the industry. And we thought, hey, what if there's a way to just create an experience where people can go, take a breath. They can still, get in touch with their inner child. We all have them, but then life happens. So let's hear about your inner child. Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, my origin story is that I'm still just a programmer, right? Programmer at heart. I've been an entrepreneur now in the last 25 or so years. Started a few different companies, but I cut my teeth in healthcare at the American Red Cross, and wow, what a great place to do that. I worked on their what was called the National Biomedical Computer System. It was basically the blood collection system. So anytime you donate blood, it gets obviously acquired from you, put into vials. It is then tested, and then it's distributed to everybody that needs the blood. And all of that process has to be 100% safe, right? It can't be 98% safe. It can't be 92% safe. It's got to be 100% safe from the time it's taken out to the time it's put into another human being. And so that process goes through a lot of regulatory, as one would imagine, requirements. And so I learned a lot about how to do safety in terms of the human body. But if you're not cyber secure these days, you impact safety as well. And so in these days, you can't really divorce the idea of cybersecurity and human safety with respect to regulatory and human safety. So from the Red Cross, I went to companies like Cardinal Health and a number of others where basically just on a day-to-day basis, we're dealing with medical devices and things that, I worked in infusion pumps, which basically put, if you put a device on you, which needs to pump medication into your body, how to do proper cybersecurity and proper secure systems designed for basically what we would consider life critical type of devices, kind of puts you in a whole different mentality. And now, with your topic that you're going to cover today with respect to ransomware at hospitals and health systems, it is literally shutting down entire business units and entire departments at hospitals, what is going on. So it's very, very nice. In the last probably 15 or so years, I've done a number of different companies. I've started several companies. Just was lucky enough to exit one just a couple of months ago that was bought out, and everything these days is so related in some way, shape, or form with cybersecurity that it was exciting to be here talking about toiling away. This was something we've been doing for decades, and it's great to be recognized. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Wow, thank you for who you are and what you do. That's really quite an extraordinary story. Tell us a little bit about your exit, if you can, that you just mentioned.
Sure. The company is called Citus Health, the one that I formed with a co-founder of mine. Her name is Melissa. Melissa is a nurse, was working with patients on a regular basis. In fact, she is a certified infusion nurse, which means nurses that go into people's homes for doing the infusions with respect to medications. Like if you have cancer, you can't just go to a normal place and just get oral medications. You have to have it infused. Nowadays, we try to do that at home instead of making people come to an infusion center or having people come to a hospital. But if you imagine you're getting something infused into your body, there's a lot of coordination that has to happen with the pharmacist, with the drug manufacturer, all the coordination that's necessary with nurses and doctors. So our system, Citus Health, which has just been purchased by a very nice company called ResMed. ResMed is the largest company in sleep apnea medical devices. They recently purchased that company to help really do proper care coordination when you are doing complex healthcare in the home, which all of us, as we get older, Gary, we want more and more care to be done at home. We don't want to go to the hospital. We don't want to go to, a surgery center or an infusion center. We'd rather it just happen all at home. But you can't really do that because all the specialists are sitting at hospitals. The devices are sitting at the hospital. So what we helped was allow those devices and things to come home and get all the core care coordination that you wanted connected at home. So you're just as safe doing all of this advanced kinds of medical care at home rather than doing it all at the hospital. And that's called the post-acute care, meaning after you come out of a hospital, it's called post-acute care. And that's the business that we were in.
I mean, we could unpack so many interesting things, but I have to tell you a coincidence that we actually created this comic. It's called Defending Your Health. Folks can get it. We donate it on our website. And basically it has two kind of communications objectives. The first was protecting personal health information because of the value, of it to human beings, but also to criminals. And the second was the safety of digital medical devices. And we depicted different characters. Here's Vernon the virus. Which is anthropomorphizing viruses, and here's Wilbur Wannacry, which is what we're talking about today, of course, regarding ransomware. And with that in mind, let me bring into the show a great guy, Charlie. I'm going to call you just Charlie because we always have this thing about pronouncing your last name. Can you say your last name?
Sure, Charlie Two Pizza. Yeah.
I actually knew.
This is fascinating when I was listening to Shahid because I'm connected to him in two ways. When at the Red Cross, I provided the Red Cross with from a small business, provide the software to calibrate all of his equipment, and then I'm a ResMed user for my sleep apnea. So go on, man. This is
awesome.
Great.
That is great to hear.
Yeah, fun.
I'm a little late on the graphic, but here's what I think about that. And by the way, if anyone wants to produce my show, help. But besides that, so how did you get here, Charlie? That's an amazing background.
Well, so I have a strong background in different enterprise kind of applications to federal government, large institutions, but through small businesses providing these products and services to on an enterprise-wide standpoint, and was very involved at the early of Department of Homeland Security with more of the physical aspects of cyber and addressing them from overall risk standpoint. So when I take a look at cyber, I look at risk management and opportunity management for a business. I don't just look at cyber. We have to look at it holistically from a whole business standpoint. And so now with my role at America's Small Business Development Centers, I'm responsible for putting together the direction of where we're going. And we have 4,000 business advisors in nearly 1,000 locations in the United States helping small businesses flourish. So part of that is making sure that they understand cyber. These threats are systemic through their organization. And it can be the legal aspect, it can be their disaster preparation aspect, it can be their accounting or whatever it is. This isn't really, in my mind, just a pure cyber thing that we have to be looking at, because if we're just looking at cyber, people roll their eyes. We have to look at it and how it impacts them. So in the context of ransomware, we'll get into that a little bit as I'm sure I'll lay some points out as we move forward. But we're really excited to have this conversation, and particularly obviously the impact in the health industry affects people directly. Recently, the ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, we see videos of people near me driving down the streets with swimming pools full of gasoline because that was a latent function of ransomware. And so it is hitting home, and we need to address these things directly now.
Hey, Gary, if you don't mind, I'd love to ask Charlie a quick question. One of the most difficult things we find, especially in healthcare, you have a single doctor's office is just as big a threat surface area as a large hospital in the sense of the importance of what they're doing.
Yep.
As you talk to small businesses, what do you think they should be doing with respect to priorities? Because they hear about all this stuff all the time. We sometimes scare people on purpose, not for no reason. How should small businesses really think about prioritizing all of these different threats?
Well, look at it from overall risk management standpoint. Look at it from a business standpoint. They happen to be holding medical records and they happen to be helping people, right? But they have the same kind of threats against their infrastructure. The people want information, or they want to alter the information. They want to steal it, they want to alter it, or they want to prevent you from having access to it, right? And so it's just, now we're just talking about threat categories, or the data categories of HIPAA versus the PII information that they may have. They may not be thinking about PII relating to their employees or their discussions. They may just be totally focused on HIPAA. They also may not be thinking about their accounting information and the things that are associated with their normal business activities that need to be kept at bay, right? So to us, when I took a look at that, I looked around for all the different resources, and I listened to the voices of people talking to small businesses, talk with a lot of small business owners, talk with a lot of people that are these voices, and I just hear confusion with no direction. So you can go onto any number of government or commercial websites, and you'll see all kinds of very helpful information. To your point, what do I do first? Well, first of all, you need to have a direction. And so that's why we call our program North Star CMM, because you have a direction. Yeah, and everybody enters into this from a different place, different reason, different business reason, different level of maturity, different level of capability, capacity. But if we're all kind of pointing towards the same direction, then we can share resources and things. So what we did is we decided to use the Department of Defense's cybersecurity maturity certification, which is a model that they created that they're mandating on federal contractors. We took off the last C because we're not focused on certification. That's a business decision itself, whether you want to be certified or not. We're more focused on the model and getting people in to be aware that they do have critical and confidential information. They have a responsibility to protect it, and now they have a direction. The what. How they do it is more of a role for professionals like yourself that really understand the intricacies of any one of those different types of data sets or the types of architectures that they have. Our role is to get them aware and get them moving and set a direction for them. And so we think that's a really important role to have a direction, and that direction happens to be from an authoritative point. So if you're standing in front of a judge, you can say you use the Department of Defense path forward. As you know, like it's based on the 171 and HIPAA on the 53, and they cross map. So it's not like you're doing one or the other. You're understanding where those things cross map, so you're not duplicating activities, and to drive those efficiencies is really important.
And to build on that and to join the show, let me welcome Scott Schober. He's a quintessential example of a great small business. Unfortunately, he was also a victim of cybercrime. And, before we go much further, I just want to give a shout out to Scott. Scott has been kind enough to be one of the sponsors of our show, and he's written these great books, so you should check them out. We also launched the Cyber Hero Network Book Club just a couple weeks ago. So Scott, thanks a lot for believing in and supporting our mission. We really appreciate it. Anyone else out there wants to join the club? We're open. So tell everyone a little bit about your small business and your origin story, how you got into all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We're a small business. We're 49 years old. We're privately held, and we focus mainly on wireless threat detection tools, which are our customer or DoD agencies, and certainly any company, large Fortune 500 companies that need security throughout their organization and want to combat that wireless threat. So it's really exciting times, and we also build some other specialized tools to really combat cyber criminals, especially when they're trying to target gas pumps and ATMs with skimmers and things like that. We have some effective tools that are used to combat those specific problems.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed. And wait, we have some breaking news. Ransomware is holding governments, the military, enterprises, SMBs, and random organizations hostage. What luck that we have this panel of experts that we'll be able to listen and learn from right now. So let's move into the specific topic, of ransomware, as a tool. I mean, sure. Charlie, when we were together at RSA, I guess it was a couple years ago now, you didn't hear too much about this stuff, and now it's everywhere.
Well, we heard about it, but no one was paying much attention to it. Let's just put it that way, right? And now it's really impacting when we see the meat industry be attacked, when we see these
hold on. Time out. Forgive the interruption, but you said meat. I was thinking about this just the other day. This country can handle a lot, but don't screw around with our meat.
Right? Exactly. That's absolutely true. So what was the question?
Well, we're talking about ransomware. Sorry.
Yeah. So we obviously, to me, you need to realize that you may not be an intended target, or somebody isn't thinking directly about you as a small business. They're not sitting in a room and thinking, or some might be, but they might not be totally thinking about you as a attack. So as a small business, you think, oh, they're not after me, I'm too small. No, but the way that these ransomwares are done, ransomware attacks are done, they're just spread out. They don't really end up knowing who the intended target is. Sometimes they do go after an intended target with a mature program that does all kinds of social engineering and things like that. But the majority of the stuff is just things that are just spread through malware, through emails, and things that people pick up and click on. So it doesn't matter if you're an intended person. So you need to take a look at what your data, the data that you have, and what do you need to hold confidential, what needs to have the integrity maintained, and how are you going to keep that so that you have access to it, right? If you don't have something in place where it's all backed up, something to protect its integrity, something to protect the confidentiality of it in place, then you're in trouble. So once you've identified those things, then you can start looking at even your infrastructure, your computers and your networks, and how to get around that, and all the expertise that these people have. A lot more expertise on that kind of stuff than I do. But it's really, like I said, we're really focused on the awareness side of this.
Yeah, could I just add, Gary, I think from a practical, what can you do perspective, especially, as we talk to, a one doc physician office with, 3 nurses and 5 admin staff, what did they do versus, at large hospitals and health systems, what can we do? I think looking at 3 things might be best for everybody up and down the chain. Number one, what is your endpoint security strategy? And there are several different techniques. And number 2, what are your authentication strategies? So if you say, well, my endpoint strategy is, hey, I just got a bunch of desktops and I've got this, remember in my world, even a digital scale is a potential entry point for a attack. And so in those cases, if you're on a local area network and you've got, client-side certificates for every one of your devices, things are good. Unfortunately, medical device manufacturers and engineers like myself who have been doing this for many years, it's a little known secret that many times you have devices that I might have built, in the late 90s or early 2000s. I had no idea that this device was ever going to be connected to a network. But now all of a sudden, 10 years after I finished the software, somebody stuck on a Wi-Fi chip with a LAN connector, and now all of a sudden it's on the network. Well, I never designed the software to be on a network, so how was I supposed to know that I was supposed to have all of this cybersecurity and everything? Of course, if it was designed in the last 15, 20 years from scratch for networking, kind of like what we did with Cardinal Health and others, these infusion pumps and medication dispensing units and things like that, when they're built from scratch, they're actually in pretty good shape. But I think what we need to do is look and say our endpoint security has got to be on client and server side certificates, and don't take no for an answer other than that. Second, from an authentication perspective, I have a very opinionated view of the world, and that is if you are not doing multi-factor authentication, at least 2-factor auth, you are not secure. Like, don't say that you actually care about security and then are not 2-factor authenticated at every client endpoint that you possibly have. And what I've been very amazed with over the last year and a half, Gary, Scott, and Charlie, is that I've been very happy that a lot of hospitals and health systems were given the chance by CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, to say, okay, during the pandemic, we have this massive emergency. It's okay for you to cut back on security first in order to be able to serve personnel. That was a very reasonable thing for the government to do. Mm-hmm. But we were so lucky that a lot of the people working at hospitals and health systems says, no way in hell am I doing that, right? I got to put in more security in order to be more remote. And that is a testament to a lot of our folks that are working within the hospitals and health systems. If you made the decision to say, okay, I'll take more lax on security and then increase on remote, what would that have done, right? It would just put more people at risk. Government gave a opening, but a lot of good professionals said, no way in hell am I doing that. So you got to move to client and server-side certificates, number one, two-factor authentication, number two, and then pick up what Charlie is saying, which is be very deliberate, very, very deliberate on risk-based threat surfaces. And if some, knucklehead consultant like me comes into you 2 weeks later and says, you know what, I think you ought to do this, 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 and this, well, you just got to ask them a question. Show me what risk framework you're using, score me the risk, and then when you score it for me, then I will prioritize appropriately. Otherwise, just get the hell out of my face, because what are you doing? You're just giving me more things to do rather than more things to solve. And that's why, in Scott's books and a lot of the stuff that they work on, it's very nice because they're scoring these, right? Do this first and then this. But I think I'd love for you guys to tell me, what do you think about the first two problems, which is if you don't have certificate-based endpoints and you don't have multi-factor authentication, is there a hope that you're ever going to be secure from ransomware?
No, I would say not likely. And maybe to your point, which I think is interesting, I don't know if you guys read about it, but just today it was reported by ZDNet. We don't know the company, but they reported on a ransomware attack that was foiled. It was about 2.5 million in Bitcoins that were demanded. And what happened was there was about 130 endpoints that were targeted, and it appeared to be, at first glance, it was identified, well, these are just remote workers accessing the network. No big deal. Not realizing it, but it was actually the group REvil, which was the same group of Russian-speaking hackers that targeted what Charlie talked about earlier, JBS meat facilities and the plants there. That same type of malware was being placed on these machines. Fortunately, they foiled the attack because they questioned it and said something's not right. These are not remote workers accessing it. And they paused it and they stopped it. But $2.5 million, that's a pretty big ransom that they discovered that was going to be in play very soon. So I think what's happening is they're getting better and better using these tools to detect these ransomware attacks immediately, and they're able to take action on them. A lot of times the problem, I think, within organizations, you're focused on your business, especially I think about hospitals. You're not sitting there waiting to be a victim of a ransomware attack and wondering how are we going to respond. You're focusing on helping the patients and dealing with that. So I think a lot of places need to get help from outside if you can't handle it within your own departments. That's real important. And just one other point I wanted to share on backups. Backups is the one thing that you can do. And again, it's not really going to prevent a ransomware attack, but it allows you to respond or have some response instead of sitting there saying, how much do I have to negotiate to pay here or through my insurance? What's covered? How much downtime? You have something to resort to. Now, the interesting stat throughout the U.S., of all the businesses, about 41% of U.S. businesses back up daily. So only 41%. Now, out of that 41%, if they're victims of a ransomware attack and they have to resort to their backup and restore, more than 50% of those restorations fail because it wasn't properly backed up. So what does that tell you? Now suddenly that whittles it down to whatever the numbers are, 20-something% that actually do it successfully. So that means 80-something% of the other companies that aren't doing their job with backing up, they're going to be victims of a ransomware attack. They got to pay the piper. That's not good. So I think implementing a proper backup plan, and if you don't know how to do it, get help. Get a consultant in there, get a third party, and get that system down so daily you're backing up your precious gems, the jewels of your company, protect that IP. Then you have something to fall back on. And I think I love to really emphasize that message, because we could talk about ransomware all day long, but if you don't really have a plan for it, you're going to be in trouble eventually. We're all going to be victimized by it, but at least you have some recourse, something to turn to if you do have that backup data. And again, remember, what do insurance companies require now? You're checking off the boxes that you are doing it. And guess what? More and more insurance companies are not really fulfilling their claims if you're not checking off the boxes. You said, I'm doing a backup, but you're not really doing it. Guess what? You're in trouble.
But, just to build on that real quickly, in addition to the backup, Scott, which is, obviously spot on, it's you have to practice. You have to do tabletops, because you may not have a phone, seriously, and you just have to practice this stuff. And, with that kind of in mind, I want to share, with our audience something we're doing in a couple weeks. We're having our next micro think tank. It's pertaining to cybersecurity and healthcare. And basically the model that we use is what you're seeing here, kind of the wisdom of the crowd, where, all of us are collectively, have more great information and ways to help than any one of us. And so stay tuned. You'll be hearing some more information about that. We'd love to have you join us as participants. So Shahid, so given your particularly unique hands-on experience in the safety of digital medical devices and things like that, are there some devices that you think still are vulnerable without disclosing anything specific, because we don't want to help the criminals?
Yeah. So absolutely, and unfortunately, it is pretty public because the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, does require when you have problems in your medical devices, you're supposed to report it. So the FDA has a Sentinel program, which you can actually look at on the public side, and unfortunately, it is very big, meaning the problem of connected medical devices, which were designed in a disconnected era. That transition has been long and arduous and very difficult. And so there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. So the IEEE, the same group that gives us all of our other standards, I was lucky enough to participate a few years ago in what they called the building code for medical devices. Just like unfortunately in the news, you heard that there's a building that collapsed in Miami. Now, that's not normal. You don't regularly see.
Forgive me. I'm literally looking at it out my window. I'm sorry to say. I live in Miami. And it unfortunately is an extraordinary tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers are with everyone affected by that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I mean, this luckily, you don't hear this all the time because we have this thing called building codes. So when you make a skyscraper, you're supposed to follow a bunch of rules. Things like you need a sprinkler system every N number of feet. You need to make sure that your concrete is up to code and that there are electrical outlets every N number of feet so you don't have people trip. So there's hundreds of these things that build this thing called the building code. Something, of course, that's why our heart goes out to these folks who lost loved ones in Miami, because even with all of these codes, a building collapsed. Now we're going to find out over the next few weeks why that was. But there is no such quote code in medical devices, cybersecurity systems, whether it's the oil and gas pipeline.
It's unbelievable. Wait a minute. This is, for me, breaking news. I've not heard this before. There is no code for medical devices.
Yeah, so there is no a certification which says, in the same way that there are for buildings and things like that, that says in order for you to stand up a building, here are the 400 things you must do. And if you don't even do 3 of them, right, there's an inspection that comes from external. I mean, there's a really nice way. I mean, we've been building buildings for thousands of years, so obviously we know how to do it. We've been building medical devices, especially digital connected ones, for a few decades, right? So one can understand why there are not huge amounts of regulatory. But a few years ago, and you can actually do this search online, called the IEEE building code for software and medical devices. So there was a bunch of engineers, groups all the way from NASA to CIA and NSA and a bunch of commercial ones, guys like me getting together to say, what should safe practices look like, right? For example, when possible, don't use C as a programming language, use a memory safe programming language, right? The silly stuff like that. And I say silly in air quotes because it's really, really important. using certificates and encryption, all the other kind of stuff. If we, the collective we, this is why I love this program, is there is no one person that knows all of this, right? It's the collective wisdom of the crowd. We have to start as buyers of things, start telling the vendors, you have to do the following. As vendors, we have to start opening up and saying, all right, here's what we're doing. What else could we do, right? Before the government comes in and gives us more regulation, there's a lot that engineers, especially people on the ground actually doing the typing and stuff, could actually do on a day-to-day basis. And Gary, as you look at this over the next few episodes, especially the one that's coming up for the healthcare one, this is really good to ask and say, have you looked at the IEEE building code one? Did you look at all the things in there? How much are you guys doing? Should we make that more formal over the coming months and years? And so you do have new standards like UL. If you flip around any of your devices, you have that UL sticker. So UL 2800, UL 2900. These are standards that are starting to be put into place so you can have some certification. But my fear is that when we look for certification, our assumption is someone knows what is the right thing to do. And we don't know what is the right thing to do in all circumstances. And that's, what Charlie's got here from a risk-based perspective that he shared. It's great to listen to and learn from.
Well, I'd like to pull on that standards thread that you just brought out. So there's 30 million small businesses in the United States that I have to kind of target, like try to figure out how to get as many of them into this as possible. And so we really do need a standard to follow, and we don't know where they're coming from, as I was mentioned earlier. What's their hottest topic? Right now, the hottest topic by far on anybody is ransomware. So this is very timely. So this is how we approach this. If you can take a look at NIST, the CISA, or anybody's guidance on ransomware, or the FTC's guidance on ransomware, it's almost identical. It just has different pictures, different orders, but the core things that you need to think about are the same. So what we did is we took a culmination of those documents, and where it says you need to back up your information, that's basically all it says, back up your information. What we did was we pulled the practice out of the cybersecurity maturity model and said, these are the three or four practices that address backup. And here's one that's level 1, here's one that's level 2, or here's one that's level 3. We'd like to have you go to 3 if possible. So we're not looking at the cybersecurity maturity model as 1, 2, and 3 progressive. We're looking at it from a topical standpoint. So now you make a decision on how you're going to do all this stuff with backup. Now, authentication that you mentioned earlier, how are you going to do authentication? There is no authentication in level 1. Level 2 says have a strong password. Level 3 gets into multi-factor authentication. Skip to 3. Do multi-level authentication, and when we talk, and we point to the practices that are associated with that. So now let me pull you back. Now, because we lit up those practices against a standard, so when you're doing those, you check it, yep, I do that, I do that, I do that. Now, when I go to a class on phishing, because you already took the class in ransomware, you already did your backup, you already segregated your data, you already did strong multi-factor authentication. You really need to focus on training your employees. But if you started off with phishing, you need to do stuff with backup. You need to do authentication. You need to segment your data. So when you go to ransomware, you already lit up those controls. And so this is the way that we're getting them into a standard, so that as they look at this from all kinds of different directions, if they come at this from a pure HIPAA standpoint, and that's a category of data, those light up all kinds of if you're doing anything with HIPAA, you're lighting up all kinds of controls or practices. So we have the holistic view of trying to make them aware of all of the standard itself holistically. But recently we've really discovered these people the small businesses don't have time. If all we do is get them to cover ransomware right now, and the topics that we're discussing, the strong passwords or multi-factor authentication, your backup, and you're protecting your certifications, we'll declare victory this year. I mean, right? So we'll just get them moving and following that standard. So as they mature, they're just checking those things off. And that's why we called our program North Star. You're going in a direction. So if somebody comes at it from a perspective that they have to be certified, like a Defense Department contractor, you're working in parallel. You can share lessons learned, best practices. You're not working at it from a certification standpoint, but at some point down the road, you may choose to be certified because you may choose to respond to a Defense Department contractor's bid because you've done these things, and all you need to do is get your certification. but you're all moving in the same direction, and you can map any standard to the 171 that is the CMMC. So that's how we're dealing with ransomware specifically right now.
And forgive the interruption, Charlie, but I just wanted to echo that that's where you and I met. I gave a keynote speech pertaining to the CMMC at MITRE. There were around 200 federal employees there, and that's when you and I met. And one of the things that I admired and why it was great to start getting to know you was because you're such an SMB advocate. The challenge or the question to you, and I'll put this out to everyone in general, is how does a small business, how do different sized businesses who may not have the resources in terms of manpower or skill sets or money, what can they do, to protect themselves? Scott, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. Sometimes you realize that you can't do everything as a small business. A lot of times as a small business owner, I wear many hats. And that's good, and that helps efficiencies of the business, but you have to know where your line is. And that, to me, I encourage other small business owners, if they don't have the knowledge base or the time or where to know to allocate the right money, hire a professional. I did it even. We hired somebody to come in and do penetration testing, to come in and do a vulnerability assessment, to understand the risks that our company has between IP, personal information, customer data, so we understand how to properly protect a lot of that information. So just because you kind of understand IT, you understand cybersecurity, doesn't mean you're the best person to make those decisions. And the other thing is, sometimes we're too close to the problem. We have our own little systems, and we overlook it and say, they'll never figure out how to get my password here, or I'm doing two-factor authentication here, but it takes too much time. We make excuses for ourselves. So using an outside third party that's going to be honest and tell you the things that may surprise you. I sat down with somebody after they went in and did vulnerability assessment, and they said, you guys did really good, except there's a couple glaring things that you may not have recognized. And I did one of those moments like, oh no, how could we have not seen that? Again, we're too close to the problem. And that sometimes really is fundamental, I think, for all, especially small businesses. We're stuck in between. Hey, the big guys, they've got the spend, they've got the money. And even if they get it wrong, they're going to spend money here, here, and here until hopefully they could patch all the vulnerabilities. Small business, you got to stay focused and spend the money in the right areas every time to stop being victimized.
Yeah, and Gary, if I could just add there, it's almost like you need, and so in my world as an entrepreneur, when we were a company that was 2 months old, we obviously did things many times differently than just a few months ago as we were being acquired. So a big company like a ResMed who just insanely cares about cybersecurity. We spent 3 months just on that, right? And so they know what they're doing. The questions that they were asking were superior, and it was easy for us to answer them because I've been in enterprise IT for a long time, and we built it from the ground up to meet those rules. But not everybody has that luxury. Right. And so you have this world right now where there's just a bunch of BS artists going in to a lot of small businesses and telling them about the 9,000 things that you have to worry about. Look, if you don't have the backups, forget everything else. Just forget it, right? I mean, if you don't have the backups, I don't want the rest of your vulnerability analysis report, right? If you don't have two-factor authentication, shut up. Stop talking about everything else. Just start there. Do you have endpoint security on each one of your things? So as you start to look at these 3 to 5 major things, like this is in healthcare, we use this example all the time, is when someone has been in a car accident, they come into your ER, the last thing you want to tell them is to eat right. First, fix them up, right? After you fix them up, then maybe a week later, a month later, 3 months later, then tell them about their vulnerability analysis and your, massive risk verifications. I mean, all this stuff is just, when you're looking at a problem, like you have a business to run and you have people to hire and maintain and retain, and there's a pandemic going on, you got to ask any consultant coming into you that gives you a vulnerability analysis, take that same analysis and slap them over the head with it and say, what the hell are you doing giving me a 9-page vulnerability analysis? First, talk to me about what are the biggest risks. And I think, Gary, that is probably the number one thing that we as an industry are doing to harm, whether it's a physician's office or a pizza shop. I mean, they're both doing important things. The pizza shop owner doesn't want to send a pizza out that's going to hurt somebody. The physician's office needs to make sure that they can save lives with the healthcare that they're practicing. And if we in the cybersecurity industry do not provide practical advice, we will continue to get impractical outputs, right? So we say things like, oh, but they should have known this. Really? How could they have just known this, right? I mean, there's 9,000 things to know. Why would they have just known that that was number one if we as an industry don't rally around it? And this is where, you know, what like Scott's books and stuff talking about, like, stop talking about everything else. If you don't have a restorable backup that you can try out tonight, don't talk about anything else, right? That's the kind of discussions that we're not really having.
Well,
excuse me just a second, because he hit a thread. He triggered me on a business thing. Right when you started, that you're going to sell your business to somebody, right? And so when we talk about risk management, opportunity management, many small businesses' dream is to sell their business, and many or give this business to their family member, right? One of the two, and so you've got to look out. Okay, so my dream is to give my business to my kids 5 years from now, or to sell it to ResMed 5 years from now. I know absolutely positive when a company comes to look at me right now, they're looking at what we're doing from a cyber perspective. And if I don't have my act together, I've lost 50%. These are the numbers that we're hearing from the investors. You've lost 50%. You can have the best thing in the world, but if you don't have your act together from a cyber perspective, and they can't come in and look at the discipline associated with what you're doing, you've lost 50% of that money that you are either giving to your children or you're taking from an investor and retiring from.
You know, one of the things to just build on everything you're sharing here, which I'm so grateful for, thank you for doing this, is that criminals are horizontally oriented. You know, they share information freely. You can get hacking as a service, you know, but the defenders, the white hats, are more vertically structured because of intellectual property, competition, rules and regulations, you know, things like that. And so one of the solutions that I'm really a giant fan of and really try to amplify their mission are the ISACs. And I had the privilege to be the master of ceremonies at a recent Health ISACs summit. And, you know, during that summit, it became very apparent to me that there is sufficient wisdom of how to do a great job protecting the healthcare ecosystem. And to Scott's point, is we have to just do it.
Yeah, that's
right, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of talk and not a lot of doing. But I think, to your point, the sharing of information too, and I just point, for example, look at what happened with Colonial Pipeline. It's a fresh topic. It's ransomware tied to all this. And what happened with that? Well, right away, and again, Colonial Pipeline is private, they shared with government agencies, FBI, information where the ransom was paid, specifically the address of the wallet. That in turn led to eventually tracking down the criminals and restoring back most of the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin there. So again, private and public sharing information, small businesses sharing information with the government, that is starting to make a big difference, a big impact in fighting ransomware. It doesn't mean it solves all the problems, but to your point, Gary, if you go down on the dark web, cyber criminals are freely sharing this information. Know-how, training, hacked passwords, everything you need to do to be a criminal is there. And it's for the most part, it's free or very affordable to get into the criminal enterprise. We need to do the same thing as good guys, but can't keep having silos between the government and the private sector. Let's share that information so we could be twice as strong together.
Yeah, and if I can add, Gary, the one thing that I'll harp on just a little bit more to make sure it hits the point to the audience is that when you're doing something in a true business fashion, you have to prioritize, right? And the number one priority that you can see just physically is, you know, something is prioritized when it's budgeted. So like I hear this kind of baloney all the time. Of course we care about cybersecurity. It's the thing that we love. And then you just look at their budget line and it's like, you know, $300 for a consultant that might come in once a quarter. Well, no, that's a bunch of BS. You don't actually care about cybersecurity because you're not budgeted for it. Now, let's assume you're a small doctor's office, a surgery center, etc. You've got budgeting to do. You can hire a nurse or a health insurance admin professional, a new doctor, or a cybersecurity consultant. Which of those do you think is going to likely get hired? It ain't going to be the cybersecurity consultant for sure. So what do? If we don't have the ISACs of the world coming in very similarly that like we treat community health, cybersecurity is not a one group problem. And, you know, Scott and Charlie can teach us this all day long, is if you don't have the groups and you don't think of this as a community health, it's a population cybersecurity problem. Just like the pandemic is a population health problem, cybersecurity in the modern sense of the word is a population health problem because it's an emergent problem, property of our system. Cybersecurity is not a thing you can buy and install into your office. It is literally an emergent property of a system. And when you look at the ISACs, one of the minor problems with the ISACs are we feel good while we're there, while we're chatting. And I love the ISACs because you actually have to have a place where you have the conversation. Question is, what do you do after you leave the ISAC?
How can you operationalize
the ISAC are not regularly talking with those people, you are not doing what the hackers are doing, right? You're doing what you're doing back to your normal day, and that's tough.
Shahid, forgive the interruption, but you're saying something incredibly timely for our work. So our little attempt to help solve that is we're creating the Cyber Hero Network, and it's folks like you. You know, I've been very fortunate over the last 4 years. I have over 23,000 connections with the smartest people in the world in cybersecurity. And, you know, the key is now, how do you operationalize that intellectual power or towards whatever the mission, you know, might be. So you'll be hearing soon the launch of the Cyber Hero Network. Basically, it's for all the good people, for the defenders of the digital universe, as a place to exchange ideas, best practices, kind of a one-stop shop for all things high quality and trusted cybersecurity. So, you know, stay tuned about that. Wow, we've a little bit over our allotted time, but I knew this would happen because you guys are awesome and there's so much going on in the world. So, Charlie, how do people get in touch with you and get more information about all the great stuff you're doing in the SMB market?
Well, americassbdc.org, and we have a resource tab that goes to cybersecurity. I did want to really quickly, as going away, talk about the sharing of information. That's one of the main reasons why, with our 4,000 people, we're trying to have a continuity of the way that we're doing it, following a model. We could have picked almost any model and used it, and it would be good. No one model is perfect. We picked the CMMC as our model because it was being forced on some other, and it has the authorization of the Defense Department. So that gives us the ability to have continuity in the way that we deliver a message, so that we can, when we do share messages, that it is in the context of that standard 80171 or anything that's around that's associated with that. And that's important. Sharing of information, Scott, and it's critical that we do these kinds of things. And that is one of the main reasons why we did pick this model, so that we have the ability, and we're putting things in place. Ironically, I just got a message about creating a sharing community through an ISAC or an ISAO while we're talking here, and we're trying to figure out what we're sharing. It's going to be different than the IT ISAC or the finance ISAC, because we have to be able to share it in a way that a small business can operationalize it or make it meaningful to them. They're not going to look at threat vectors and figure out how they're going to avoid a threat vector.
Well, Charlie, I mean,
Thanks, Gary.
Awesome. Just to operationalize what you're saying, welcome aboard. We'll be honored to collaborate with what you're doing in any way, shape, or form as part of the Cyber Hero Network. You can bolt on your whole thing. We can have a whole thing about SMBs if you want. You know, whatever I know you're quasi-government, you know, in the way you work and all that, but anything that the Cyber Hero Network can do to help you, you know, just consider it done.
We're looking for all ways to get messages out to support small businesses.
Yeah, cool. So Shahid, how do people get a hold of you, and any final thoughts
Yeah, so one quick shout out to another group that does sharing beautifully for us in the cybersecurity world, and that is called the SCF, the Secure Controls Framework. If you don't know that site, just look it up, Secure Controls Framework, I believe, .org. What they've done is like the yeoman's work to connect GDPR with HIPAA and the NIST 853. So if you wanted a compendium of the entire world of how these controls map to different ones, let me just give a shout out to those guys, literally toiling away, doing free work for the community, all together sharing by putting it up on a open source style. So in that same vein, what I've done is we've prepared a new site over the last couple of years called Medigy, MEDIGY, where basically we're connecting hospitals and health systems with the vendors and the suppliers and the innovators in healthcare information technology, so they can come to one place where the hospitals can complain about the vendors, quote, complain, and the vendors can say, well, tell us more. How do you want us to be more secure? And so you need a place where the buyers are sitting side by side with the suppliers and working on cybersecurity functionality. What do you expect for all this stuff to do? Because I think, Gary, what you're highlighting in this community is if we don't get together and at least establish our minimum expectations of each other, buyers, suppliers, supply chain, etc., then it's just a nice conversation, but nothing's actually going to happen. And so that's why it's nice to be, on an episode, especially with Scott, who's writing this stuff down, trying to teach this and getting this going forward, because at some point somebody's got to put pen to paper. Some point somebody's got to put code down. Like, I'm a programmer, so I code regularly. And so by putting this stuff out, seeing that it's open source, putting the communities out there, it's just fantastic. And just a quick shout out to what Charlie's doing. I love the idea of using CMMC in a way that's actually implementable by small businesses, because seeing CMMC is one thing, what small businesses need is another thing, but connecting the two, that is a non-trivial activity, and I'm really excited that Charlie's taking care of that.
Well, we're having fun.
To also extend, sorry, Charlie, to just extend the same platform to you, with your buyers and sellers. That happens to be something we're very interested in, and what I think can collectively come up with is sort of like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, or Better Business Bureau, or whatever it is. But so you just shoot me an email, Shahid, and with an email introduction, and you can check with Scott. We get stuff done fast,
absolutely,
at a high level. So, thank you so much, Scott. You have the final word.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for great conversation, and honored to be part of it. And I just encourage all the viewers and listeners, put on your own cyber hero uniform, costume. Join us. If you're a small business owner, don't feel like you're out there alone. There's a lot of us that work together that can provide help and resources so all of us can stay safe in this crazy world with all the cyber attacks, and especially what we talked about today, ransomware. And certainly you could find out more about myself. Just go to scottschober.com, and there's tons of videos, content, tips, things that you could download for free. Thanks again, Gary, for all you do.
You're welcome. And indeed, he happened to mention a costume. I'll have my right-hand person here put something, which is right here. This is my right-hand man. Is going to put something up here because we did a show on sustainability and end of e-life data destruction and how to do it. And we created a comic about that. So here I am going to Best Buy in the era of COVID. We're going to the return area.
Get on top of this stuff here. That's all you gotta do.
Okay. So here we go. It's easy peasy to recycle at Best Buy. Ah. Mission accomplished. Anyway, listen, just so to put out, I think I'm bad, but besides from that, I'll close the way I opened. Thank you on behalf of a digital universe, a grateful digital universe, to Charlie, Shahid, and Scott for who you are and not just doing what you do, but why you do it. There are a lot more good people than there are criminals. Way more. I don't know the ratio, but it's a lot. And all we have to do is unleash this power, and that's a solution. It's complicated how to do it, but when smart people get together, good things happen. If you want to be a guest on the show, just send a note to Gary at cyberheroescomics.com. Or if you want to attend one of our events, check out our new website, which is going to be launched shortly, cyberheronetwork.com. But we'll have that up shortly. And, again, thank you so much for who you are and what you do, and have a great day.
Thank you.